Now, the revolt of 1857. The revolt of 1857 was a product of the character and policies of colonial rule. The cumulative effect of British expansionist policies, economic exploitation, and administrative innovations over the years had adversely affected the positions of all, be they the rulers of the Indian states, sepoys, zamindars, peasants, traders, artisans, pandits, maulvis, etc. The simmering discontent burst in the form of a violent storm in 1857, which shook the British Empire in India to its very foundations. The causes of the revolt emerged from all aspects. They were socio-cultural causes, economic and political causes of daily existence of Indian population cutting through all sections and classes. These causes are discussed below. First, we will discuss the economic causes of the revolt. The colonial policies of the East India Company destroyed the traditional economic fabric of the Indian society. The peasantry were never really to recover from the disabilities imposed by the new and highly unpopular revenue settlement. Impoverished by heavy taxation, the peasants resorted to loans from moneylenders and traders at usurious rates. Usurious means very high rates. The latter often evicting the former on non-payment of debt dues. These moneylenders and traders emerged as the new landlords, while the scourge of indebtedness has continued to plague Indian society to this day. British rule also meant misery to the artisans and handicraftsmen. The annexation of Indian states by the company cut off their major source of patronage. Added to this, British policy discouraged Indian handicrafts and promoted British goods. The highly skilled Indian craftsmen were forced to look for alternate sources of employment that hardly existed, as the destruction of Indian handicrafts were not accompanied by the development of modern industries. Karl Marx remarked in 1853, "It was the British intruder who broke up the Indian handloom and destroyed the spinning wheel." England began with depriving the Indian cottons from the European market. It then introduced twist into Hindustan and in the end inundated the very mother country of cotton with cottons. Zamindar, the traditional landed aristocracy, often saw their land rights forfeited, forfeited, with frequent use of a quo warranto by the administration. This resulted in a loss of status for them in the villages. In Awadh, the storm center of the revolt, 21,000 talukdars had their estates confiscated and suddenly found themselves without a source of income, unable to work, ashamed to beg, condemned to penury. These dispossessed talukdars seized the opportunity presented by the sepoy revolt to oppose the British and regain what they had lost. The ruination of the Indian industry increased the pressure on agriculture and land. The lopsided development in which resulted in pauperization of the country in general. The ruination of Indian industry increased the pressure on agriculture and land. The lopsided development in which resulted in pauperization of the country in general. Now here pauperization means impoverishment, that is the act of making someone poor. That is impoverishment, act of making someone poor. Now political causes of the revolt of 1857. The East India Company's greedy policy of aggrandizement, accompanied by broken pledges and oaths, resulted in loss of political prestige for it on the one hand, and caused suspicion in the minds of almost all ruling princes in India. On the other, through such policies as of effective control, then subsidiary alliance, then doctrine of lapse. The right of succession was denied to Hindu princes. The house of Mughals was humbled when, on Prince Fakhruddin's death in 1856, whose succession had been recognized conditionally by Lord Dalhousie, Lord Canning announced that the next prince on succession would have to renounce the regal title and the ancestral Mughal palaces, in addition to renunciations agreed upon by Prince Fakhruddin. The collapse of rulers, the erstwhile aristocracy, also adversely affected those sections of the Indian society which derived their sustenance from cultural and religious pursuits. Administrative causes. Rampant corruption in the company's administration, especially among the police, petty officials and lower law courts, and the absentee sovereignty-ship character of British rule imparted a foreign and alien look to it in the eyes of the Indians. Next comes socio-religious causes of the revolt. Racial overtones and superiority complex characterized the British administrative attitude towards the native Indian population. The activities of the Christian missionaries who followed the British flag in India were looked upon with suspicion by Indians. The attempts at socio-religious reforms such as abolition of sati, support to widow remarriage and women's education were seen by a large section of the population as interference in the social and religious domains of Indian society by outsiders. These fears were further compounded by government's decision to tax mosques and temple lands and legislative measures such as Religious Disabilities Act 1856, which modified Hindu customs, for instance declaring that a change in religion did not debar a son from inheriting the property of his heathen father, Heathen. Now, heathen means a person who does not belong to a widely held religion, especially one who is not a Christian, Jew or Muslim, as regarded by those who do. That is a person who does not belong to a widely held religion. Now, next comes the influence of outside events. The revolt of 1857 coincided with certain outside events in which the British suffered serious losses. The first Afghan War from 1838 to 1842, then Punjab Wars from 1845 to 1849, then Crimean Wars 1854 to 1856, then Santhal Rebellion 1855 to 1857. These had obvious psychological repercussions. Repercussions means consequences. Now, discontent among sepoys. The conditions of service in the company's army and cantonments increasingly came into conflict with the religious beliefs and prejudices of the sepoys working in the English army. Restrictions on wearing caste and sectarian marks and secret rumors of proselytizing activities of chaplains, CHAPLAINS, often maintained on the company's expenses, were interpreted by Indian sepoys who were generally conservative by nature as interference in their religious affairs. Now, here proselytize means to try to persuade people to join a religion, cause or group. The spelling is PROSELYTIZE. Sometimes it is also written as PROSELYTISE. Now next, to the religious Hindu of the time, crossing the seas meant loss of caste. In 1856, Lord Canning's government passed the General Service Enlistment Act, which decreed that all future recruits to the Bengal army would have to give an undertaking to serve anywhere their services might be required by the government. This caused resentment. The Indian sepoy was equally unhappy with his emoluments compared to his British counterpart. A more immediate cause of the sepoys' dissatisfaction was the order that they would not be given the foreign service allowance, which was also known as BATA, BHATTA, when serving in Sindh or in Punjab. The annexation of Awadh, home of many of the sepoys, further inflamed their feelings. The Indian sepoy was made to feel a subordinate at every step and was discriminated against racially and in matters of promotions and privileges. The discontent of the sepoys was not limited to matters military. It reflected the general disenchantment with and opposition to British rule. The sepoy, in fact, was a peasant in uniform, whose consciousness was not divorced from that of the rural population. The army voiced grievances other than its own, and the movement spread beyond the army, observes S. Gopal. Finally, there had been a long history of revolts in the British Indian Army. It was in Bengal in 1764, in Vellore, VELLOR in 1806, in Barakpur in 1825, and during the Afghan Wars, which lasted from 1838 to 1842. Now, beginning and spread of the revolt of 1857. The reports about the mixing of bone dust in atta, ATTA, flour, and the introduction of the Enfield rifle enhanced the sepoys' growing disaffection with the government. The cartridge of the new rifle, which had to be bitten off before loading, and the grease was reportedly made of beef and pig fat. The army administration did nothing to allay these fears, and the sepoys felt their religion was in grave danger. The greased cartridges did not create a new cause of discontent in the army, but supplied the occasion for the simmering discontent to come out in the open. The revolt began at Meerut, 58 kilometers from Delhi, on 10th of May 1857, and then gathering force rapidly, soon embraced a vast area from the Punjab in the north and the Narmada in the south to Bihar in the east and Rajputana in the west. Even before the Meerut incident, there were rumblings of resentment in various cantonments. The 19th Native Infantry at Berhampur, Berhampur, which refused to use the newly introduced inhaled rifle and broke out in mutiny in February 1857, was disbanded in March 1857. A young sepoy of the 34th Native Infantry, Mangal Pandey, went a step further and fired at the sergeant major of his unit at Barakpur. He was overpowered and executed on 6th of April, while his regiment was disbanded in May. The 7th Awadh Regiment, which defied its officers on 3rd of May, met with a similar fate. And then came the explosion at Meerut. On 24th of April, 90 men of 3rd Native Cavalry refused to accept the greased cartridges. On May 9th, 85 of them were dismissed, sentenced to 10 years imprisonment and put in fetters. This sparked off a general mutiny among the Indian soldiers stationed at Meerut. The very next day, on May 10th, they released their imprisoned comrades, killed their officers, and unfurled the banner of revolt. They set off for Delhi after sunset. In Delhi, the local infantry joined them, killed their own European officers, including Simon Fraser, the political agent, and seized the city of Delhi. Lieutenant Willoughby, Willoughby, the officer in charge of the magazine at Delhi, offered some resistance but was overcome. The aged and powerless Bahadur Shah Zafar was proclaimed the Emperor of India. Delhi was soon to become the center of the Great Revolt and Bahadur Shah its symbol. This spontaneous raising of the last Mughal king to the leadership of the country was a recognition of the fact that the long reign of Mughal dynasty had become the traditional symbol of the India's political unity. With this single act, the sepoys had transformed a mutiny of soldiers into a revolutionary war, while all Indian chiefs who took part in the revolt hastened to proclaim their loyalty to the Mughal emperor. Bahadur Shah, after initial vacillation, wrote letters to all the chiefs and rulers of India urging them to organize a confederacy of Indian states to fight and replace the British regime. Initial vacillation means urging. The entire Bengal army soon rose in revolt, which spread quickly. Awadh, Rohilkhand, the Doab, the Bundelkhand, Central India, large parts of Bihar and East Punjab shook off the British authority. The revolt of the sepoys was accompanied by a rebellion of the civil population, particularly in the northwestern provinces and Awadh. Their accumulated grievances found immediate expression, and they rose en masse to give vent to their opposition to British rule. It is a widespread participation in the revolt by the peasantry, the artisans, shopkeepers, day labourers, zamindars, religious, mendicants, priests and civil servants which gave it real strength as well as the character of a popular revolt. Here the peasants and petty zamindars gave free expression to their grievances by attacking the moneylenders and zamindars who had displaced them from the land. They took advantage of the revolt to destroy the moneylenders' account books and debt records. They also attacked the British established law courts, revenue offices, tehsils, revenue records and police stations. According to one estimate of the total number of about 1,50,000 men who died fighting the English in Awadh, over 1 lakh were civilians. Within a month of the capture of Delhi, the revolt spread to different parts of the country. Now we'll discuss the storm centers and leaders of the revolt. At Delhi, the nominal and symbolic leadership belonged to the Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah, but the real command lay with the court of soldiers headed by General Bakht Khan, who had led the revolt of Bareilly troops and fought them and brought them to Delhi. The court consisted of 10 members, 6 from the army and 4 from the civilian departments. The court conducted the affairs of the states in the name of the emperor. Emperor Bahadur Shah was perhaps the weakest link in the chain of leadership of the revolt. His weak personality, old age and lack of leadership qualities created political weakness at the nerve center of the revolt and did incalculable damage to it. At Kanpur, the natural choice was Nana Sahib, the adopted son of the last Peshwa Bajirao II. He was refused the family title and banished from Pune, was living near Kanpur. Nana Sahib expelled the English from Kanpur, proclaimed himself the Peshwa, acknowledged Bahadur Shah as the Emperor of India and declared himself to be his governor. Sir Hugh Wheeler, Hughwheeler, Wheeler, commanding the station, surrendered on 27th of June 1857. Begum Hazrat Mahal took over the reins at Lucknow, where the rebellion broke out on 4th of June 1857, and popular sympathy was overwhelmingly in the favour of the deposed Nawab. Her son Birjis Qadir was proclaimed the Nawab and a regular administration was organized with important offices shared equally by Muslims and Hindus. Henry Lawrence, the British resident, the European inhabitants and a few hundred loyal sepoys took shelter in the residency. The residency was besieged by the Indian rebels and Sir Henry was killed during the siege. The command of the besieged garrison devolved on Brigadier Inglis, Inglis, who held out against heavy odds. The early attempts of Sir Henry Havelock and Sir James Outram to recover Lucknow met with no success. Finally, Sir Colin Campbell, the new commander-in-chief, evacuated the Europeans with the help of Gorkha regiments. In March 1858, the city was finally recovered by British, but guerrilla activity continued till September of the same year. At Bareilly, Khan Bahadur, a descendant of the former ruler of Rohilkhand, was placed in command. Not enthusiastic about the pension being granted by the British, he organized an army of 40,000 soldiers and offered stiff resistance to the British. In Bihar, the revolt was led by Kunwar Singh, the Zamindar of Jagdishpur. An old man in his 70s, he nursed a grudge against the British who had deprived him of his estates. He unhesitatingly joined the sepoys when they reached Ara from Dinapur. Maulvi Ahmadullah of Faizabad was another outstanding leader of the revolt. He was a native of Madras and had moved to Faizabad in the north, where he fought a stiff battle against the British troops. I will again repeat it. Maulvi Ahmadullah of Faizabad was another outstanding leader of the revolt. He was a native of Madras and had moved to Faizabad in the north, where he fought a stiff battle against the British troops. He emerged as one of the revolt's acknowledged leaders once it broke out in Awadh in May 1857. The most outstanding leader of the revolt was Rani Lakshmi Bai, who assumed the leadership of the sepoys at Jhansi. Lord Dalhousie, the Governor-General, had refused to allow her adopted son to succeed to the throne after her husband, Raja Gangadhar Rao, died, and had annexed the state by the application of the infamous doctrine of lapse. Driven out of the Jhansi by British forces, she gave the battle cry, "Main apni Jhansi nahi dungi," I shall not give away my Jhansi. She was joined by Tantia Tope, a close associate of Nana Sahib. After the loss of Kanpur, Rani of Jhansi and Tantia Tope marched towards Gwalior, where they were hailed by the Indian soldiers. The Scindia, the local ruler, however, decided to side with the English and took shelter at Agra. Nana Sahib was proclaimed the Peshwa, and plans were chalked out for a march into the south. Gwalior was recaptured by the English in June 1858. For more than a year, the rebels carried on their struggle against heavy odds. Now we will discuss the suppression of the revolt of 1857. Now the suppression of the revolt. The revolt was finally suppressed. The British captured Delhi, On September 20th, 1857, after prolonged and bitter fighting, John Nicholson, the leader of the siege, was badly wounded and later succumbed to his injuries. Bahadur Shah was taken prisoner. The royal princes were captured and butchered on the spot, publicly shot at point-blank range by Lieutenant Hudson himself. The emperor was exiled to Rangoon, where he died in 1862. Thus, the great house of Mughals was finally and completely extinguished. Terrible vengeance was wreaked on the inhabitants of Delhi. With the fall of Delhi, the focal point of the revolt disappeared. One by one, all the great leaders of the revolt fell. Military operations for the recapture of Kanpur were closely associated with the recovery of Lucknow. Sir Colin Campbell occupied Kanpur on December 6, 1857. Nana Sahib, defeated at Kanpur, escaped to Nepal in early 1859, never to be heard of again. His close associate Tantia Tope escaped into the jungles of central India, was captured while asleep in April 1859 and put to death. The Rani of Jhansi had died on the battlefield earlier in June 1858. Jhansi was recaptured through assault by Sir Hugh Rose. By 1859, Kunwar Singh, Bakht Khan, Khan Bahadur Khan of Bareilly, Rao Sahib, who was the brother of Nana Sahib, and Maulvi Ahmadullah were all dead, while the Begum of Awadh was compelled to hide in Nepal. At Banaras, a rebellion had been organized, which was mercilessly suppressed by Colonial Neil, NEILL, who put to death all suspected rebels and even disorderly sepoys. By the end of 1859, British authority over India was fully re-established. The British government had to pour immense supplies of men, money and arms into the country, though Indians had to later repay the entire cost through their own suppression. Now, causes of the failure of this 1857 revolt. Limited territorial spread was one factor. There was no all India veneer about the revolt. VENEER. The eastern, southern and western parts of India remained more or less unaffected. Certain classes and groups did not join and in fact worked against the revolt. Big zamindars acted as breakwaters to storm. Even Awadh talukdars backed off once promises of land restitution were spelt out. Moneylenders and merchants suffered the wrath of mutineers badly and anyway saw their class interests better protected under British patronage. Modern educated Indians viewed this revolt as backward looking and mistakenly hoped the British would usher in an era of modernization. Most Indian rulers refused to join and often gave active help to the British. By one estimate, not more than 1/4 of the total area and not more than 1/10 of the total population was affected. The Indian soldiers were poorly equipped materially, fighting generally with swords and spears and very few guns and muskets. On the other hand, the European soldiers were equipped with the latest weapons of war like the Enfield rifle. The electric telegraph kept the commander-in-chief informed about the movements and strategy of the rebels. The revolt was poorly organized with no coordination or central leadership. The principal rebel leaders, Nana Sahib, then Tantia Tope, then Kunwar Singh, then Lakshmi Bai, were no match to their British opponents in generalship. On the other hand, the East India Company was fortunate in having the services of the men of exceptional abilities in the Lawrence brother, John Nicholson, James Outram, Henry Havelock, Edward, etc. The mutineers lacked a clear understanding of the colonial rule, nor did they have a forward-looking program, a coherent ideology, a political perspective, or a societal alternative. The rebels represented diverse elements with differing grievances and concepts of current politics. The lack of unity among Indians was perhaps unavoidable at this stage of Indian history. Modern nationalism was yet unknown in India. In fact, the revolt of 1857 played an important role in bringing the Indian people together and imparting to them the consciousness of belonging to one country. Now, Hindu-Muslim unity factor. During the entire revolt, there was complete cooperation between Muslims and Hindus at all levels, people, soldiers and leaders. All rebels acknowledged Bahadur Shah Zafar, a Muslim, as the emperor, and the first impulse of the Hindu sepoys at Meerut was to march to Delhi, the Mughal imperial capital. Rebels and sepoys, both Hindu and Muslim, respected each other's sentiment. Immediate banning of cow slaughter was ordered once the revolt was successful in a particular area. Both Hindus and Muslims were well represented in a leadership. For instance, Nana Sahib had Azimullah, a Muslim and an expert in political propaganda, as an aide, while Lakshmi Bai had the solid support of Afghan soldiers. Thus, the events of 1857 demonstrated that the people and politics of India was not basically communal before 1858. Now, nature of the revolt of 1857. Views differ on the nature of the 1857 revolt. It was a mere sepoy mutiny. To some British historians, a wholly unpatriotic and selfish sepoy mutiny with no native leadership and no popular support, said John Seeley, S-E-E-L-E-Y. However, it is not a complete picture of the event, as it involved many sections of the civilian population and not just the sepoys. The discontent of the sepoys was just one cause of the disturbance. Dr. K. Datta considers the revolts of 1857 to have been, in the main, a military outbreak which was taken advantage of by certain discontented princes and landlords whose interests had been affected by the new political order. The last mentioned factor give it an aura of a popular uprising in certain areas. It was never all Indian in character, but was localized, restricted and poorly organized. Further, says Datta, the movement was marked by absence of cohesion and unity of purpose among the various sections of the rebels. It was at the beginning of the 20th century that the revolt of 1857 came to be interpreted as a planned war of national independence by V.D. Savarkar, Veer Damodar Savarkar, in his book First War of Independence. Dr. S.N. Sen, in his 1857, considers the revolt as having been as a fight for a religion, but ended as a war of independence. Dr. R.C. Majumdar, however, considered it as neither the first nor the national nor a war of independence, as large parts of the country remained unaffected and many sections of the people took no part in the upsurge. According to Marxist historians, the 1857 revolt was the struggle of the soldier-peasant democratic combined against foreign as well as feudal bondage. However, this view does not stand scrutiny in the light of the fact that the leaders of the revolt themselves came from a feudal background. The revolt of 1857 was not easy to categorize. While one can easily dismiss some views such as those of L.E.R. Rees, R-E-E-S, who consider it to be a war of fanatic religionists against Christians, or T.R. Holmes, who saw it in a conflict between civilization and barbarism. One cannot quite go so far as to accept it as a war of independence. It had seeds of nationalism and anti-imperialism, but the concept of common nationality and nationhood was not inherent to the revolt of 1857. One may say that the revolt of 1857 was the first great struggle of Indians to throw off British rule. It established local traditions of resistance to British rule, which were to pave the way for the modern national movement. Consequences of the revolt of 1857. The revolt of 1857 marks a turning point in the history of India. It led to changes in the system of administration and the policy of the government. Now, first consequence. The direct responsibility for the administration of the country was assumed by the British Crown and the company rule was abolished. The assumption of the government of India by the Sovereign of the Great Britain was announced by Lord Canning at a darbar at Allahabad in the Queen's Proclamation issued on November 1st, 1858. Second, the era of annexations and expansion ended and the British promised to respect the dignity and rights of the native princes. Third, the Indian states were henceforth to recognize the paramountcy of the British Crown and were to be treated as parts of a single charge. Fourth, the army, which was at the forefront of the outbreak, was thoroughly reorganized and British military policy came to be dominated by the idea of division and counterpoise. Fifth, racial hatred and suspicion between the Indians and English was aggravated. Now, views of some prominent authors. Mr. R.C. Majumdar has said, it is difficult to avoid the conclusion that the so-called First National War of Independence of 1857 is neither first nor national nor war of independence. Next, Mr. S.N. Sen. The mutiny became a revolt and assumed a political character when the mutineers of Meerut placed themselves under the King of Delhi, and a section of the landed aristocracy and civil population decided in his favor. What began as a fight for religion ended as a war of independence. Mr. John Lawrence, had a single leader of ability arisen among them, the rebels, we must have been lost beyond redemption. Now, according to Marxist interpretation, the revolt of 1857 was a struggle of the soldier, peasant, demographic combined against foreign imperialism as well as indigenous landlordism. Next, Hugh Here lay the woman who was the only man among the rebels. It was a tribute from Hugh to the Rani of Jhansi from the man who defeated her. Next is Stanley Wolpert, WLPERT. It was far more than a mutiny, yet much less than a first war of independence. Now we'll discuss a summary of the revolt of 1857. Revolt. It was a product of character and policies of colonial rule. Economic causes were heavy taxation under new revenue settlement, then summary evictions, then discriminatory tariff policy against Indian products, then destruction of traditional handicrafts industry, and absence of concomitant industrialization on modern lines that hit peasants, artisans and small zamindars. Next, political causes. Greedy policy of aggrandizement, absentee sojournership character of British rule, British interference in socio-religious affairs of Indian public. Military causes. Discontent among sepoys for economic, psychological and religious regions coupled with a long history of revolts. Next, the centers of revolts and leaders. At Delhi, the leader was General Bakht Khan. At Kanpur, Nana Sahib. At Lucknow, Begum Hazrat Mahal. At Bareilly, Khan Bahadur. At Bihar, the fiery Kunwar Singh. At Faizabad, Maulvi Ahmadullah. At Jhansi, Rani Lakshmibai. The British resistance. At Delhi, Lieutenant Willoughby, John Nicholson, Lieutenant Hudson. At Kanpur, Sir Hugh Wheeler, Sir Colin Campbell. At Lucknow, Henry Lawrence, Brigadier Inglis, Henry Havelock, James Outram, Sir Colin Campbell. At Jhansi, Sir Hugh Groves. At Banaras, Colonel James Neal. Causes of failure. First, limited territorial and social base. Next, crucial support of certain sections of Indian public to British authorities. Third, lack of resources as compared to those of British. Fourth, lack of coordination and central leadership. Fifth, lack of a coherent ideology and a political perspective. Next, nature. Not quite the first war of independence, but sowed the seeds of nationalism and the quest for freedom from alien rule. Effect. The Crown took over the administration of India, company rule was abolished, Queen's proclamation altered administration, army reorganized, racial hatred was deepened between the English and the Indians.